been trying to figure out some of this tech stuff on the fly, and not as simple as I thought it would be. And we've also, if you probably have already noticed, we've missing a couple panelists. David Hargett had a family emergency yesterday, and then Brian Bullman also had a family emergency this afternoon while he was driving out here. And so, unfortunately, they are not able to be here. And then Thom Goolsby, I don't know. I have no idea why he's not here right now. So it's unfortunate. But I think we've got plenty of brilliant panelists to help us along with this conversation. One of the most important panelists is Andrea Hermann, and she's going to be Skyping in. We're going to try to make it work. We might have to get her on speakerphone on the cell phone if we can't get the audio to work for her. But she's been in the business for like 2 decades, and she's involved with it all over the world. She's been kind of a voice for the hemp industry, and also I think medical cannabis as well. And so I appreciate her boldness. I'm going to try to get this working, so just kind of bear with us. But in the meantime, if the panel would like to introduce themselves, and there's also an event program. If you guys haven't gotten one yet. So starting off with Joy, tell us about yourself, how you kind of got introduced to this issue, and how you might have evolved on it.
I'm Joy Elliott. I'm not a Republican. I'm a Libertarian. So we're doing his now, or cook one. But anyway, I'm the first elected Libertarian in Wakefield.
Hello, Andrea speaking.
Sorry, Joy. Hey, hi, Andrea. We've started. I kind of gave you a little introduction, and we're going around the panelists right now. Here's the panel. We've had.
So you'll just have to pardon the little bit of vehicle noise behind me.
All right. So Joy was just introducing herself, and sorry for the interruption.
Anyway, I was first elected Libertarian. I have been involved with marijuana and hemp issue ever since high school, and that was back in the 70s. So I've been on top of this issue for a very long time. Unfortunately, I had a son who also has seizure disorder, and it has brought it more home to me now that this issue is hurting our future generations, hurting children, hurting people that might have medical need, as well as industrial hemp is hurting the economy, not being produced. The loss of tobacco revenue for the farmers in North Carolina is devastating. I grew up on a family farm. We're still involved in that, but the income level from the tobacco to what it is now barely covers the property taxes. So you're going to see a lot more small farmers drop out of farming, and actually losing that diversity and ending up with monopoly farms could hurt people in the long run, because even if they produce without competition, their prices will inevitably go up. So yeah, I've been very significantly involved and understand the issue quite well from several different angles.
My name is Glen Bradley. I served in the North Carolina State House in 2011 to 2012. I was a very strong advocate for the small family farmer, as well as an advocate for liberty and freedom. And I also signed on, co-sponsored medicinal cannabis and signed the discharge petition when the leadership of the House decided to make that go away. I'm very strong and solid in my positions about liberty. I hate all parties. Every party that exists, I hate them all. I ended up registering as a Republican and running for office for the same reason that Ron Paul registered for a Republican and ran for office, because the situation is very much set against people who are either independents or third parties. I also remember when I was in grade school. I remember back in the early '80s when Ronald Reagan came out with his war on drugs. I was pretty young. I mean, I'm only 42 now, but I remember when this came out, and I didn't even know what a drug was, but it didn't sound very compatible with what I understood to be freedom, where we each own our own bodies, and we get to choose what we do or do not ingest. That's been a guiding principle of mine for quite a long time. It's one of the reasons why I became involved in the Liberty Movement, one of the reasons I became involved in Ron Paul, and one of the reasons I ended up in the State House and why I'm here today. So I'm here today to talk about legislative issues in terms of what we can and must do in order to get this passed through the legislature, and help with any questions regarding the operations of government.
I am Conrad James, born and raised here in Raleigh. Come from Love, Haiti, which is Live Ultraviolet Haiti, project me and 4 of my friends are working on down in Haiti. Basically, it's economic development in Haiti based on hemp-based products. Mostly focusing on CBD oils, but because the CBD oils come from the actual flower of hemp, the rest of it, the fibers and everything, we have a lot of use for all that. We can use every single part of that. I've been involved in this movement for about 3 years now. I started, I was the campaign director for Normal, North Carolina Normal, for 6 months. That bill he was talking about actually got me my job loss. So we got 5,000 people to walk for medical marijuana, and lost my dad to cancer. So I have like a heavy heart when it comes to these issues. So I'm here to talk about economic development and how it can stimulate an economy. If it can stimulate Haiti's economy, which is a third world country, I can only imagine what we do in a first world country.
So, Andrea, I asked the panelists, and I'm going to ask you, how did you get introduced to this topic of industrial hemp, and how did you kind of evolve on the issue, if at all?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm not sure if you can see me or not there. Hello. Yeah. So just to tell you, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hello everybody. I'm coming into you from around my hometown, Glen, Missouri. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, how I really came into my passion surrounding industrial hemp was, in the state of Missouri, we do have a rich, long hemp history here, and it's something that's been in my family lineage also, as my family came back from, as we moved, sort of pushed from the Cherokees up into Oklahoma. But essentially, when I was in my undergrad work, I had about 2 years left, and my advisor said, Andrea, you've got to declare a major. And I said, I don't really know what I want to do. And he says, well, I want to know what, you're really passionate about, and you've got to go out there and do something about. So, of course, I said, I'm really engaged in what's going on with industrial hemp. And that was in early 2000. So by the winter of 2000, I had to earned an internship working with the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers up in Manitoba, Canada. And I spent the next some years assisting in their plant breeding program. And then I became a provincial nominee and immigrated to Canada from Missouri in the summer of 2004. And then since then, I've gone to do my master's in hemp fiber agronomy and became a provincial nominee, immigrated, and now hold dual citizenship, and continue to take the knowledge that I gained internationally, nationally, to really help shape sensible policy when it comes to the cultivation and industrial hemp, and also understanding that one policy for one area might not work for another area, depending on already what legislative policies they have in place or infrastructure that they have in place to actually produce the crop.
Okay. Well, I guess that kind of brings me into the next question. What is some of the historical significance of this industry? And I'll
And
start.
you're still speaking to me, correct, Eric?
Yeah, I'll start off with you, Andrea.
Okay, well, historically, of course, we know, may have been, you'll have to pardon, I can't hear what else is going on in the room, so you'll have to pardon me if I repeated something that somebody has already spoke about. Well, of course, we have, the Marijuana Tax Act, which looped what was then still hemp in, and then really led to the all-in-all abandonment of hemp cultivation in the United States, controlled over with the Controlled Substance Act. But what we've seen is in, like 1998, hemp was re-legalized as an agricultural crop in Canada, and that really kicked off what is our modern day market. Of course, if we look at our colleagues in Europe and in China and in Asia, the cultivation of hemp really never stopped. So we already had developing industries in these other places in the early 90s because the cultivation had never stopped. Now, the cultivation wasn't on the rise until we really started to see the Canadian marketplace really bring that in. And that marketplace was driven by both, US companies and Canadian companies really coming to the table. To further push that, we had DEA versus HIA versus DEA, and we won that, and that's why we have hemp food products on the shelf today. And then further driving, we now have the Industrial Hemp Farming Act that's sitting both in the House and in the Senate. I definitely encourage everybody to go to votehemp.com and have your opinion heard when it comes to the cultivation of industrial hemp. We have 8 states right now that have had hemp trials in underneath Section 706 of the Farm Bill. And that Farm Bill, that Section 7606 does allow for State Department of Agriculture's and places of higher academia, which could be a 2-year college, technical school, or full-blown college or university, to conduct hemp research in states where rules have then thus been promulgated to do so. And and we see this change happening. We see the recognition of industrial hemp, and we know that the U.S. is the largest importer of hemp products that come from on the textile and on the food side. So we are the largest marketplace, and we are now staging that fact so that we can introduce this crop into the U.S. And part of those keys will be looking at variety trials.
Okay, thank you. Does any of the other panel have anything to add to what she said?
Well, if we're talking about the history of hemp, of course, most of us who are here realize that hemp is a very useful crop. And Thomas Jefferson grew it and said it was one of the most important crops for the entire United States. During World War I and World War II, they actually passed laws that said the farmers had to grow hemp because it was too valuable to the war effort to not grow hemp. The products that we get from hemp, like hemp rope, is stronger than what we have today with our other natural fibers or synthetic fibers. So in terms of the history of it, it is absolutely a cash crop. It's been required growing in the past for many years. And the cultivation of hemp and the public cultivation of hemp goes at least back to Thomas Jefferson, who said everyone should grow it. It was one of the most important crops in the United States history.
Joy, would you guys like to add anything to that?
Actually, it predates that.
Yeah.
Ever
yeah,
since
of
the
course.
beginning, because it's what they made ropes,
Well, tens of thousands
canvas.
of years, yeah.
Yeah, it's been for,
Most of your sailing ships and tall ships were built with hemp.
right.
Hemp rope, they also used it for
Henry Ford
caulking.
made a whole car out of hemp.
Well, I don't know about that. But no, they would use the hemp fibers for sails, ropes, even to caulk the boards in between the boards.
And it's also my understanding that
Great biofuel.
the early explorers also would eat the hemp seeds because it is a good source of protein and omega-3, all your amino acids and everything. And also they could, if their sails were in such bad condition that they couldn't really sail, they could land on an island, plant the seeds, and within 6 months or so, they have enough material to then process and make new sails. or fix their sails, patch their sails.
Don't know if that was ever put in practice, because if you gotta look at the terms, depending on where they landed, obviously you gotta have food, water, and
Right.
stuff in that order too. So I don't know if that practice ever would.
Well, the hemp seeds are foods. So, but anyways, I'm not a time traveler, so. Okay, so we might have lost her. No, it looks like we still got it. So, all right. So we're not quite to questions yet. So coming. So we know we have a history in this country, in the world, really, that historically we used a lot of hemp products. We've talked a little bit about the term marijuana, the terms medical cannabis have come up. What are the differences between hemp and other variations that people might think of when they think of hemp? And Andrea, I'll start this question off with you, since you're the university professor. Can you hear me, Andrea? I think we might have lost her. I don't know. Andrea.
Hi, yes.
Okay. I'm not sure if we lost you there. I was gonna start you off with the next question. So whenever we talk about hemp, it seems to come up that people want to talk about medical cannabis and recreational use. What are the differences between the hemp plant and other plants that people confuse with hemp?
Well, really, we now have state industrial hemp on a bit of an arbitrary level of one compound called THC, and this has become what has become the international definition of industrial hemp based on THC. Now, that THC level does vary, so if you look at our colleagues in the EU, for instance, it's a 0.2% THC allowable. If you look in Canada and the proposed legislation in the US and in most US states, it's based on 0.3%. And then if you look at regulations like we have in Australia, where you have a 1% level, and that falls underneath their Poisons Act. So it's dependent. And we've also in the past has said that, you know, medical cannabis or marijuana was visually density, for instance. We can't really say that anymore because of the new looking at using industrial hemp or part of the cannabis plant family, a plant, to get other compounds out of them, such as CBD, for instance. Now, there are some back legislation that really doesn't allow the general sale of a CBD product because it is a resin of the plant. But essentially, you know, part of the major differences is that we're not growing high-grade marijuana for the food qualities, for instance. So part of the attributes of industrial hemp is that we've grown it as a food crop, is that it's very high in your essential fatty acids. And not only does it have the short chain omega-6s and 3s, it has those long chain gamma-linoleic acid, GLA, arachidonic acid, SCA. And these are really long, super polyunsaturated fats that when we consume them, they stay together and we start making longer fat. And then these are the things that start to power our brain and our body. In addition to that, looking at the fiber quality, so the fast fiber off the outside that could go into textiles, where it could go into a non-woven type of product or into like a feltish type of product. In addition, using that inner core called the herd, which is also priced in because of its silica content in the cellulose for a building material. So these are just some of the attributes, but now we're seeing, you know, the face of what industrial hemp really means. We're still just barely starting to scratch the surface of everything that we can do with this plant, depending on agronomics, number one, and the different types of agronomic practices that are used to grow this crop.
All right, thank you. Now, would you guys like to add anything to that about the differences between industrial hemp and other variations?
Well, the primary difference, to make it easier to explain to other folks who might not know, is industrial hemp does not have the THC content to be useful as a drug at all. So if someone's growing industrial hemp, no one's going to get high off of it. It's just not possible.
All right.
Yeah, so used mostly for medical purposes if you are smoking or ingesting for that.
Okay. All right. Andrea. So, is there an issue with generations of hemp plants increasing their THC content as they go through generational cycles?
Yes, we have seen that now. What you'll see in most countries that have legalized the cultivation of industrial hemp is that it's maintained through a pedigreed seed system. And you will see this not only in the cannabis plant species, but other plant species, that if you don't keep its genetics true, then it starts to become something else. That could result in various heights in the field, that can result in a spike in THC level, which is how we're defining this crop. So maintenance programs are really key to maintain the varieties, because in addition, if you want to be growing a food crop, let's say, and you are growing that because the certain variety happens to have a really, a better gamelinolate profile, that's that long super polyunsaturated fat. If we're wanting to breed for that, and we've developed a product based on this or on a flavor profile, because some of the varieties will have a bit of a softer, stronger nutty profile. So you want to make sure that that cultivar stays true. In addition, when it comes to farming this crop, when you come into harvest it, you want to make sure that you have a relatively same height, so that when you're harvesting it, it adds to the ease of the harvest. You want your kernels to be the same size. You want your seed set to be at the same staging, so that you're having a uniform harvest. So absolutely, maintenance via pedigreed seed system programs are really key to maintaining those varieties, because we don't want to see our hemp fields, if we are regulated by THC, as we are currently, we don't want to see that spiking, even though we know that the kernel itself, or the grain or the seed, is actually or innately free of THC, but it's just that dusting on the outside. So maintenance programs are really key.
Okay, do you guys have anything to add to that? Andrea, are you familiar with the Native American tribe that recently had their whole hemp farm destroyed?
Yes, a little bit. I haven't had the opportunity to reach out to them directly. I mean, I have some questions when it comes to where they source the material at and these types of things. I'm not for sure if this was feral material that they had already. But those are some issues that, of course, have to be dealt with. Unfortunately, the way that the DEA has handled it has not been the most professional. And I do know that the Vote Hemp actually today put out a press release pertaining to that. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time to strictly review it. I will be reaching out to them, of course, to lend any hand. But we're going to see this sort of these growing pains. So why were they not recognized as a sovereign nation? These types of questions. I'm not sure, because I wasn't directly engaged in that project. I can say that I have a 12 variety trial in conjunction with North Dakota State University, and that was completely fine. We had all the paperwork. We imported planting seed from 3 different countries, all with DEA permits, and we've had no issues there. So I'm not for sure if it was a lack of some sort of paperwork that needed to be filed, or some sort of notification that needed to be done, or if it's actually pure ignorance.
Right. Yeah. So we see that this industry is not without a multitude of challenges. Could you guys talk about, and I'll start off with Conrad. Could you guys talk about some of the other challenges that face the industry, whether they're legal issues or conceptual issues, just other issues that make it difficult?
Well, right now, the major issue for us right now is that we're trying to get the farmers to understand that they're not growing marijuana. Like, they can't smoke it, they can't cut the stalk and pass it to their friends and stuff. And just them recognizing that, we lost We lost about 50 pounds of product of hemp this past crop because farmers wanted to smoke it or pass footprints or stuff like that. So that's but I mean that just comes with ignorance and they don't really grow that stuff there. But the hardest part is going to be actually extracting CBD oil from hemp because you only have a 1%, not even 0.1% range of titration, or else the entire shipment gets seized and we lose about. I mean, right now the average price of CBD oil that medical researchers are paying for is $400,000 a kilo. So you can imagine how much seizure and tax and all the other stuff that we're gonna have to go through. That's gonna be the hardest part. Is meeting those standards, making sure that the farmers don't have any cross-pollination and have any type of genetic mutation with their crops. That's gonna be the hardest challenge as far as that goes, because we're importing it through New Orleans, the port of New Orleans, and luckily it's legal to import it there. It's just logistics. Logistics is going to be the hardest part because we're doing it from Haiti and bringing it here. Logistics is probably the hardest part.
Well, I think where we want to get to is we want to get to a place where North Carolina farmers are actually growing a hemp crop and selling it in terms of the fiber, the fuel, the food, etc. And the challenges that we have when it comes to that are significant. Even if we manage to completely legalize industrial hemp at the state level, we still have federal prohibition to deal with. And frankly, we have a lot of lawmakers in the state of North Carolina who are too cowardly to deal with passing such laws as industrial hemp. The reality is the lawmakers understand that it's a good idea, but just because it's a good idea does not give them the courage to move it forward. They're too afraid of the voters, and that's the other challenge that we have to deal with is the social challenge. Particularly in the South, there is this concept that hemp is going to be the same thing as marijuana, and anyone who wants anything to do with industrial hemp really just wants to go out and get stoned. And that's a social issue that we also have to overcome. We can overcome part of the legal challenge by legalizing it in the state and by electing members of our General Assembly who have enough courage to stand up against the federal government. But the biggest challenge, I think, is going to be overcoming the social issues. And those are just going to go away with time, quite frankly. The younger generations don't have this big stigma that's attached to hemp that some of the older generations do. So over time, that is eventually going to go away. But right now, the bigger issue that we have to deal with, more than the legal challenge, is going to be the social challenge, because the social beliefs drives the legal position that we have to deal with.
I've got a question though. Isn't it on McCory's desk right now, like for him to sign it into law?
One of the things you'll discover is most of the laws passed that are accomplishing things don't really accomplish anything. They're just for show. And I think that's one of the issues that we have now with there's an industrial hemp bill.
Well, it got added
SB 313.
It got added
Okay.
to a bill at the last second.
It was added
Sure,
to the Registry of Deeds bill.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It was a tack on.
That's not uncommon. I'm not sure what the language of this bill is, but I would be surprised if it had any significant impact on the actual production of industrial hemp in the state of North Carolina.
What's supposed to make us the 27th state to
Well, the other 26, are they actually growing it?
No.
Well, see, there you go. These laws are mostly about covering a political base and not about actually getting things done.
Exactly, because that's what happened with the CBD oil bill. It was all for show. Nobody in North Carolina can legally get CBD oil right now. Even though that passed like 2 years ago and he signed it, it was in hollow law. It was completely hot air.
Yeah, gentleman want to ask a question?
Sure. So the fact that we're growing, or we have the potential to grow hemp, and branded to a state bill in the 25 states, but it's still illegal on the federal level.
Yes.
Since it's still.
Yeah, the federal government is a bit schizophrenic. You know, ever since the lobbyist people from DuPont got in there back in the Reefer Madness days, you know, they've been peddling these lies that, you know, smoking cannabis makes college kids schizophrenic and makes white women want to sleep with colored men, and just all this junk that's just complete junk. And federal health.
That was the DEA's language. That was Harry J. Anslinger's language.
Well, yeah, he became.
That was an example.
Yeah, I'm using the language that they literally used on the floor of the Congress. These are they literally made these BS arguments on the floor of the Congress back in the early 30s, back when all of our medicines had cannabis, cannabinoid, whatever stuff in them.
And the way they slipped it in was they called it by a slang name.
Right.
And the AMA, and the pharmaceuticals who were making cannabis products at the time were unaware that their cannabis products would be illegal because they're marijuana. They didn't associate the two until it was too late. Until, you know, the cat was out of the bag. So.
And a little history on the AMA, it was set up by the pharmaceutical industry to control the medical industry so that it would maximize profits for this pharmaceutical industry. And so for them to get rid of this natural plant that can be grown for little to nothing, it's just going to maximize their profits. So with the prohibition, the guy that was the chief lobbyist became the head of the DEA. It wasn't until maybe a couple months ago that the federal government, at least some arm of the health research drug policy people, admitted that it does actually in fact have medical benefits. They still haven't changed the scheduling. The scheduling still says it has no medical benefits and that it's extremely addictive, which it is not. Granted, we're talking about industrial hemp, but we kind of have to talk about this stuff just because it all is tied together. It's very, very much related in the genetic code, but also just in the cultural perception and thought of our country. It's all kind of tied together, and so. You know, I'm happy to combat all the propaganda and lies anytime.
Well, there's one other issue that's not legal in nature, and that is industrial infrastructure. Because right now, the pulp productions are geared, for paper at least, is geared towards tree pulp and other forms of pulp, and they might have to be re-engineered to accommodate. And that's investment capital that would have to be put forth to do a transition from tree pulp or jute pulp to hemp pulp. So, I mean, there's cultivation differences too that would have to be addressed. Possibly other farm implements or equipment would have to be purchased by people that wanted to farm hemp.
Well, hemp's very
I can comment on that also.
Sure, go ahead,
I was
Andrea.
gonna say, I can comment on that. I think that you bring up a really great point about infrastructure. Absolutely right. The machines that used to do all of the cordage manufacturing, and as you were saying in the pulping industry, has the use of natural fibers is dissolved out of that. That reintroduction is happening. But if we look at farming equipment, if you're growing other grain crops, you might have to do some slight modifications, on-farm modifications to the equipment, but it could be you might not need to do any. And some of those modifications may be something as simple as wrapping some PVC piping around some of the moving parts, or looking in your combine to see where you're starting to get a little bit of a bind at, and then see if there's a little nick there, and you can go in with a file and file that down. But I have seen many farms that have existed that have gone right in with their regular equipment, other research stations that have used their seeding equipment. So those things are relatively set up. We have the same grain bins, and if you look at production in the prairies of Manitoba, and then you look at grain production in the northern part of the United States, or through the Great Plains and the prairies of the United States, all of that equipment exists. Seed cleaning equipment exists. So when you switch to food production, if you're crushing sunflowers or canola or soybeans, you can crush hemp also. It's the same type of machines that do that. It's the same type of machine, the milling to make it. protein powders in the flowers. So absolutely, some of that infrastructure's got to be brought in. And if you look on the side of decortication, those machines, we can go and buy them. Yes, right now we're buying them from European companies because they have continued to manufacture in this way. But it is as simple as going and buying the machinery and setting it up in the United States. I just had the opportunity to travel to China to learn more about the textile industry. And that really showed me also that we could grow textile grade industrial hemp in the United States and use some of the machines that we already have. And if you look at in North Carolina particularly, you have already the infrastructure to bring fibers in. Maybe you need to build the infrastructure to decorticate the fibers, but the machinery to do all of the weaving exists. So I have a real positive outlook on the fact that the infrastructure that we need, we can get. Yes, it does need investment, but that opens up opportunity.
So I'm sorry, one of our panelists, Brian Bullman, couldn't be here tonight, but he actually has a processing facility in Asheville, North Carolina. I believe you and Brian Bullman have already met at another educational function. He had a family emergency, so he couldn't be here tonight. But just to wrap up our conversation about the challenges of the industry, could you speak to some of the opposition or lobbyist groups that work against this cause? I know historically it's been the timber industry because they don't want to give up the all the paper and stuff that they can print. And I've heard here in North Carolina recently, the law enforcement industry this year did not oppose the hemp bill. I think maybe because they see that it'll create jobs. But can you talk about some of the opposition out there, big opposition?
Yeah, unfortunately, most of the opposition is just lack of knowledge base. And I would say that if you would put a police officer in plain clothes and you brought one from Australia, New Zealand, any EU country, and Canada, and the United States, and you put those police officers in a lineup, you would not be able to pick one from the other. And that really drives a point saying that if we have these regulations, they give us the capacity to know exactly where an industrial hemp field is, exactly where a marijuana field is, or where any cannabis that's growing is located because it's registered. On a commercial scale, we're not talking about clandestine in your backyard scenario. When we're talking about commercial scale, that gives those police officers, they're then empowered to know where these are going, these roads, these farming fields are happening at. When we talk about like who's really campaigning against us, I find now we're starting to see a lot of changeover. For instance, Oregon State University has changed underneath the College of Forestry. They have changed wood science and engineering to renewable materials because even the forest industry and the paper industry has now been mandated also by laws imposed on them or standards imposed on them to use alternative or green materials. So that shift is happening within those companies also. And I really say that we don't have a lot of people campaigning against us. It's just as the other delegates on the panel said, it's about getting that education out there and switching that level of ignorance to actually putting the product in their hand and letting them see that and what market can drive. And we look at over $40 million of material coming out of Canada alone, and we're still a niche crop. It's a huge opportunity, and I feel we need to empower, especially the law enforcement, to become part of the solution. Invite them to the table. If there is a workshop in your area for anything, reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like, to invite the local sheriff or the local fire department or the local ag extension person to get engaged with that. So I feel that we're seeing less and less push on the side of prevention and on more and more push on the side of saying, I don't understand. And so how can we get to understanding all this? And lean on our international colleagues working around the globe to actually put those things in motion. Always drive that thing. We have to cherish our international colleagues. And okay, yes, you want to tell me that we want to make hemp clothing. Okay, well then let's work with our colleagues in Asia to get the fiber grades that we need so that we can do the milling, so we can show them. Let's bring in the herds so we can get the building project on, so we can show them and use our power of our international network to remove the ignorance, and that's our biggest combator right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Would any of the other panel like to touch on challenges or opposition, I should say, to our cause specifically? Okay, so I agree, and that the education thing, that's why we're doing this right here, and so and we're going to keep on fighting for and educating people on various issues until we see them through to completion. So about the industry, what do you think would happen to the industry in at least North America if all the states legalized hemp production? Would you see a kind of a mass exodus from Canada to warmer states like North Carolina, where we have great soil and a very enthusiastic, robust farming community?
I see from the Canadian perspective, it's a huge opportunity to really grow the industry overall. I mean, because we have wheat production in the United States, it doesn't hurt the wheat production in Canada. The same in other niche crops. Let's talk about something like flax. Even though we're growing flax in the U.S. also, the drivers out of the Canadian industry with something called Flax 2020 that really opened the door for flax, end up driving a lot of the market in the U.S. also, which drove more acreage in Canada. So when we start talking about the global need for hemp foods and products, I don't feel that there's a threat as it's coming from like people saying, oh, well, why would Canada want that? Canada wants that because we need to do more work in this industry. We need to get this food products on the shelf more. We need to make it the sunrise bar and not the hemp sunrise bar. So when you start looking at the grander scheme of things, the more production is great for the entire industry.
Okay, so you guys now, Conrad, with your production, how do you think the industry would respond to hemp farming being legal across the United States for medicinal production? How do you think the market would shift? And do you think North Carolina would be a big hub for?
I would love to grow hemp here in North Carolina. The reason why we are doing this in Haiti right now is because it's close to the equator, and it can be grown there the entire year. And then the strain that we basically produce, it can be harvested in anywhere from 90 to 110 days. So that means every 3 months, maybe 4 months, it can be harvested. So that's a crop every 4 months. I would love for that to happen here. I would definitely transfer that here. The reason why we wanted to do it in third world countries is because we're looking at giving 10,000 to 15,000 factory and farming jobs in Haiti. And if you can do that in Haiti, that's a lot of jobs here in North Carolina that people don't have. I mean, there's a lot of tobacco farmers that tobacco doesn't get paid as much. Isn't as much per acre as hemp per acre. I mean, it only takes 3 to 7 acres of hemp to produce a kilogram of CBD oil, and the CBD oil once again goes for $400,000 per kilo. So even if they only use 10 acres of their entire farm and dedicate it to hemp, that's still a lot of money per acre.
Speaking of your oil, I drive a diesel truck. I like biofuel. My question to you is, how many acres produces a barrel of oil that you use?
I have no idea. So I'm not even focusing on
So yeah, well, that's a good question, and we're gonna get to a section on that. So sit tight. Do you guys have anything to add as far as what you think would?
Well, in terms of bringing the crop to North Carolina is a particularly good state for doing this. Hemp tends to thrive in the same conditions as tobacco, and tobacco is eventually a dying crop. There's going to be people who smoke cigarettes forever, so it's never going to go completely away. But the reality is it's becoming a lot less popular. And as tobacco dies away, these farmers are going to need something to replace it with. And the best crop in terms of growing in the same conditions would be hemp, and it's a cash crop. So it's definitely a good idea. It's good for North Carolina, and it will help restore some of those revenues that we're losing by going away from hemp.
The beauty of growing hemp though is that it doesn't need pesticides, doesn't need any type of weedicide because it grows so dense that sunlight doesn't get to the ground. So weeds don't usually grow around it. No pesticides. No pesticides either. It means that's not going to our groundwater. It also takes up the toxic materials like lead, mercury, arsenic, things that is in our water system now to produce energy, and mercury, cadmium, stuff that is like nuclear waste. It gets taken up by the hemp plant, not in a negative way. It actually is basically like filtered out, and then takes almost little to no irrigation change as far as using water for that.
So what you're talking about is what I was going to say. It's called remediation.
That's the main one.
It's a big word for me right now. Anyway, like you were saying, with the ash spill into the river, that could have been prevented if they had just grown an acre strip of industrial hemp between those ponds and the river. It would not have made it through that. And they're actually growing this in near Chernobyl in order to soak up some of the nuclear problem that they had in Chernobyl, and they've had great success with that in cleaning up the environment. That is reduced the amount of time they believe before that area will be habitable again. And Japan, with their nuclear disaster, are also looking into growing industrial hemp in order to sop up the toxins in the soil and the water to get them out of it.
Thank you. So we're gonna transition to talking about some of the uses we haven't, but Brian's got a question, so let's take a question from Brian.
Two questions that I'd like to hear from the panel. One is, if a farmer goes out and gets a seed for a industrial hemp variety, plants it in his field and grows it, what's the difference of them going out and buying a bag of corn and planting it, or soy and planting it? What are the regulation hurdles, given that it's a different plant? Well, and another question, and then I'll let the whole board go through, and Conrad, this generally goes for you, is on the transporting, on importing, and this is a conversation that I had many years ago specifically about Haiti, was looking at establishing coffee plantations, which take a long time to establish well-producing, high-quality plantations, but taking also hemp products from a country such as Haiti, really needs the economic development, and taking bulk pulp material and bringing it to the St. John's River, to the paper plants in Jacksonville that were struggling in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. What are the regulatory hurdles to moving that material? And what are the regulatory hurdles to the farmer who goes and gets an industrial product seed, plants it in his field, and grows an industrial grade material, which is got a minimal or negligible THC content?
Well, one of the problems that you run into is that so far as the law is concerned, hemp and marijuana are not different plants. They're the exact same genus and species. This is one of the things that I ran into when I was in the General Assembly, and I did a study on biofuels. And while cannabis is a pretty solid biofuel, something like sorghum bicolor is actually a better biofuel. So that's one of the things that we want to remain some realism on. But what I learned during that process is that industrial hemp and marijuana and cannabis are the exact same genus and species. So far as science is concerned, they're the same plant. Just like a Chihuahua and a Doberman Shepherd or Doberman Pinscher are both the same genus and species of dog. They're completely different dogs as you and I would perceive them. But so far as science is concerned, they're both dogs. And it's going to be the same thing with cannabis and hemp. So far as science is concerned, they're both cannabis, same genus and species, even though industrial hemp has basically no THC. It's not something that's recognized by current science.
And your second question?
Regarding the transportation, so
Of the pulp itself?
of the materials themselves, so fibers, pulp,
Right.
even the CBD, which I understand that has a DEA
Yeah.
requirement, but the other materials, does this even touch DEA? What is that process that is the barrier that you would want to see legislators, lower those barriers?
Thank you, Andrea.
Yes, I can do a quick comment on that. Right now, all the products that are entering into the United States, they are registered underneath something that's called an HS code. These are harmonized systems codes. So the products that are coming in. No, I'm not speaking about CBD particularly in this case because it actually doesn't have an HS code coming into the United States so far. So the hemp seed oil, the protein powders, the hulled hemp or your hemp parts all do have these HS codes. Now the question comes to be, now underneath section 7606, it says in there that we can market, but it did not talk about removing that material from within that state that it was produced. So part of language that's now coming into the new Omnibus bill states allowing that material that has been, we'll say in some sense, denatured or created a HS coded product that is a free for sale product on the shelf already to allow that to move outside of the state. Some issues with the section 7606 or states that have put legislation in haven't talked about certain issues pertaining to moving this material around. There's lots of the legislation doesn't even talk about rendering it non-viable, and that's one of the key points that you were questioning about is, getting the seed itself. Right now, that seed has to be brought in underneath the DEA import permit, which is a free permit to apply for. If you're talking about importing in, some states have allowed feral collection programs to start up. Some states have just said, we don't care. They kind of turned their eye to the store bringing in the hemp seed from somewhere. But also included in the seed purchase has to be an understanding of plant breeders' rights and pedigree seed production. So those are really important so that we can actually work once again with our international colleagues to bring in these stable varieties, because if we want to be growing it for any attribute, we want to make sure that it's stable. So right now there is HS codes for these products. This is why they are on the shelf. In addition, some of the other regulations that have not been addressed truly yet in the United States is THC levels in the food products themselves, for instance. So in Canada, the regulation states that a food product, so any hemp seed oil, hulled hemp protein powder product coming out of Canada, that protein powder or oil or food grain derivative, as it's called, has to be tested also for THC. It has to be 10 parts per million or less. So we've got that. We don't see that in the US right now. Also in the EU, they are right now, the European Industrial Hemp Association is working in Brussels and in the EU to put some sort of regulation when it comes to THC in those foods, which those are going to be even stricter. So I'm battling them to say, absolutely not. Let's not make our THC levels in our food product derivatives stricter. It makes no sense, especially since in Canada we've been producing foods from plants at 0.3% or less, with 10 parts per million or less THC. But the real issue is saying, if I grow a crop that's 0.3%, if that's our arbitrary THC level, why do I need to further test the food? But then you have a situation where if somebody doesn't clean their grain properly and there's a lot of chaff and green parts in there and they go to crush that, that starts to decarboxylate what THC is there. That THC will cling to the fat, and then you may have issues with spikes in THC levels in hemp seed oil, albeit that they're not going to be enough to get you high. So that's some of the sort of inner workings of shipping and food regulations that we'll have to really pay attention to. And on the farmer level, of course, without the farmers, none of us are working in this industry, have to really hone in on making sure that they're also keeping the quality of the kernel or the grain at its highest, for better use of words, so that when we do go to manufacture these foods from U.S. grown hemp or other products, that it is of the quality that is comparable to what we're seeing on the shelf today.
It's my understanding that as long as I import it as like a manufactured product, I should have no problem with bringing it to any state. Any state, I should have no problem. But when I have it as a pulp, I still have to get it tested for not each shipment. It's like every 4, maybe 5 shipments. So I'm gonna have it tested. With CBD oil, as long as the first shipment that we do it meets the regulation, it's going to be like completely random. But as long as the first one is good, we shouldn't have too much of a problem.
Okay. Do you guys have anything to add? All right. Well, thank you for the great question. So, Andrea, picking up on this conversation, what do you know what percentage or of THC in the plant or parts per million actually cause someone to have some sort of a high or a physiological perceived effect?
I would imagine on some people even 5% maybe. I think we would see that already, and I think also it's not about just the THC, as you well all know. But yes, I mean, those types of research would need to be done and conducted, and I know that there is a lot of peer-reviewed research out there looking at the level or percentage of THC, but what THC are we talking about also? Total THC, is it decarboxylated or not, the uptake of that? But yeah, that's a great question. What level would you become high per se off of the THC? And we know when we look at the conjunction of cannabinoids that you need the trigger of a little bit of THC to maybe help another cannabinoid do its job. Okay. We just know for the fact is that you're not going to fail a workplace drug test off of food products that are at least 10 parts per million that have been grown from a crop of 0.3%, and that grain was clean to 99.9%, which is a standard food safety parameters. Okay.
Now, and since we're on the subject of food, can you hit on some of the? I can do it probably not as good as you. So can you hit on some of the benefits of eating hemp and eating food products from that plant?
Absolutely. One of the things that I already spoke about was the essential fatty acid profile, but in addition, the dietary fiber and the highly digestible proteins as a raw format. So if we look at soy, yes, soy may have a little bit more protein, but that protein is actually not digestible because of the format that it's in. But when you look at industrial hemp, grain derivative protein products, it's very digestible. You're getting up to that 98% digestibility, which is massive. And in addition, if we look even further at the array of minerals and vitamins that are in the hemp kernel or the hemp oil itself starts to really aid. So then we're getting those Bs, we are getting the thiamine, we're getting the folate all combined in this hemp food. Not to mind that it is vegan. I did want to make a comment about, when we're talking about the production of hemp, when it comes to the use of pesticides and fertilizers, pesticides are something that's regulated. So can hemp grow without it? Yes. Is all hemp grown without it? No, because of the regulations that allow for certain pesticides to be approved for production. So it has to be very specific in the contract when it comes to that, or they will spray it if they are allowed, because it is the mentality of a lot of farmers that if they can spray, they will.
Okay. You guys like to add anything to the food issue? So.
Actually, there's something small I'll add. If you ever have done the research to create like energy bars, or protein bars for long-term food storage, one of the things you realize is other forms of protein don't have the same balance of the 8 essential amino acids as hemp does. If you want to create a true meal replacement bar, you can go to 100 different sources of protein to create these bars, but none of them has a better balance of the 8 essential amino acids that hemp does. It's just the best.
Awesome. And along this line of talking about the different uses for this plant, are you familiar, Andrea, with the use of the oil in engines, combustible engines, and jet engines?
A little bit. I won't claim to be an expert on that. I would definitely suggest for people to look up Dr. Richard Cronus's work coming out of the University of Connecticut on converting hemp seed oil into biofuels or into a biofuel. I have seen veggie mobiles run right on hemp seed oil, so is it possible? Absolutely. But this also takes our shift back to looking at pardon me, the need to develop the cultivars actually for that. So is there a necessary need to use high essential fatty acid hemp seed oil that we could use as a dietary food to put in our engine? Or could we develop the cultivars that are actually going to increase the oil content and not spend so much time and money focusing on the line and selection to breed for essential fatty acids? So once again, that opens up an opportunity in the plant program scope. Is it possible? Absolutely. Right now, the production is really geared towards the food industry, but once again, it opens up an opportunity for that. But please check out Dr. Richard Cronus's work coming out of the University of Connecticut.
As part of bioremediation, the hemp that is grown in these easements around potential toxic zones like nuclear power plants or coal ash pits or even hog waste or any of heavy metal waste toxins. Almost everywhere that the industrial hemp is used as a toxic cleaning crop, it's never used for food. It always ends up being biofuel. But it also makes those areas, instead of being an easement full of monkey grass, it's full of a commercially viable crop that farmer isn't just throwing away acres and acres of land that's flanking waterways simply to keep pollutants from their other crops from going into that waterway. Because as right now in North Carolina, you have to have a 20-foot easement on the side of a waterway, and right now they're supposed to plant monkey grass in that easement. And monkey grass, if you don't know what that is, it's a very short plant. You don't have to mow it. It's supposed to sop up any runoff from the cotton field or these other highly toxic crops that have a lot of pesticides associated with them. But what happens is it creates this lovely green lush highway for people with four-wheelers and mini bikes, and they end up throwing a whole bunch of oil and skunk and pollution and trash. Yeah, whereas if this land that was the easement was industrial hemp, you're not going to have people with four-wheelers plowing through an industrial hemp field.
Oh, come on, you know they'll try.
They'll try.
There's always that one guy.
It won't be so much fun though. So, but anyway, they just but that's what typically happens for the biofuels, is that they do have a place and they wouldn't take away from the food usage as an industrial hemp for food. So there's room for both.
On the food issue, a question of just conversion ratios. Oftentimes plants are measured in their conversion both in surface area and in nutrient uptake to make a viable food product. How does hemp stand in comparison to other food crops in terms of its value per acre of converting limited resources, the nutrients, the fertilizers, and that into functional foodstuffs?
You guys want to start off with that? Or
I'm
It's a
not
good question. I don't know the answer.
Andrea, did you hear his question?
No, I didn't, but would you repeat it?
Yeah, I'm going to try to. I'm going to do my best. So he's audience member asks, how does hemp compare in basically how well it's able to take nutrients out of the soil and make a volume
Acre per yield.
Compared to
when
others.
you're talking about grain production, you're going to be looking at somewhere on average between 800 all the way up to around 1,200 pounds of clean dry weight per acre when you're talking about grain production. Now, I have seen as low as 400. I have seen as high as I've seen as high as 2,000 pounds per acre. Now, that's clean dry weight of hemp grain. The current contracting prices in Canada range from around 75 cents to 90 cents a pound for clean dry weight conventional. So that crop could have potentially had, well, it definitely had the crop prior sprayed. It probably had a Roundup prior to planting. That's going to be a lot of those brands that are playing natural on the conventional side. So that's around 70 to 90 cents a pound. Then you have a marketplace for a little bit of transitional or some unique markets that are working with growers to transition out of pesticide use or minimal impact farming. That's gaining around the 90 cents a pound, and those are some unique contracts. And then if you look on the side of organic growers are making anywhere from 95 cents all the way up to like $1.20 to $1.35 a pound for certified organic, which was an amazing opportunity for organic growers to come in, or growers that are interested in transitioning their land to organic to come in on those contracts. And companies like Nativa, for instance, which have a fair market share, are looking to have organic acres in the United States and to help develop those sectors. So when it comes to inputs, it's very much like growing a high, 13.5% protein content wheat or canola. So you're looking around, we really want to target 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So you will see people say, oh, you can grow this without fertilizer. Well, yeah, you could grow without fertilizer, but why would you when you want to have that really good crop stand? And I just want to comment, I love the comment about they wouldn't be four-wheeling through the hemp. Absolutely not. It would wrap so bad underneath there, they would not even think about four-wheeling through the hemp. So great point of view.
So in terms of talking to farmers, and sort of the direction that farmers are going to think about is when you talk about yield per acre, to be able to say to a farmer that it's an easy expectation in a non-organic production to get between $200 and $400 per acre. I know finishing calves, finishing beef cattle was around $200, $250 an acre. What kind of?
Yeah, definitely on the hemp side of things. I mean, Canada is one of our top ranking yield or, farm gate crops, and you would be looking at around that $250 profit per acre. And that could definitely increase. And that number right there is when you're only talking about only harvesting for grain and not for fiber production also. So then you come back in and you're growing a dual cultivar or even a triple cultivar, depending on if you're collecting that chaff off to do other sequestering or the green part. And then you come back in and you take your dual fiber off afterwards to create your non-wovens, your composites, those types of scenarios. That really starts to drive that farmer's farm gate up. So I bet in the long run they could be, honestly making $500 to $800 an acre if we're talking about a triple to quadruple crop usage.
Now, where would that sit under crop rotation in comparison to soil usage like tobacco, corn, soybean? I've seen a lot of that grown. I spent a few years in Mississippi farmland, and I see farmers rotate their crops a lot between rice, soybeans, corn, on that order. Where would the take from the soil be compared to something like that on the hemp?
Oh, as you're talking about uptake of nutrients from the soil per se in the crop, that's what you're speaking about?
Correct.
I would say you're more looking at, well, it's kind of hard to compare because some of those crops don't have the same, of course, fiber profiling and uptake. I'd have to honestly look back, but you can also, another great search is search John Hurd, Heard, John Hurd the word Manitoba, and the word nutrient uptake hemp. So that's John Hurd, Manitoba Nutrient Uptake Hemp. They did some really great research out of something called the Parkland Crop Diversification Foundation, which in addition, you can download all of the Parkland Crop Diversification Foundation's annual reports, which have an array of agronomic research that has been done in Canada. And those downloads are from like 1999. So I often will tell people to look at those so they can get an idea about what kind of agronomic research has come out and the numbers to back that, looking at these varieties out of Canada. And European varieties have been included in the trials.
That would actually be something pretty useful for the farmers to look at if they wanted to do this. I guess you didn't hear me.
But the rotations that we're seeing in Canada, or whether or not you look in the EU and Canada, I mean, it's rotating with other grain crops. It's also, the best of course is rotating with an alfalfa rotation, because of just the alfalfa feeding the nitrogen, then you have less inputs, which increases your farm gate. In addition, it's a great rotation with soybeans, because hemp is known to have, and there's some preliminary research coming out, fighting soybean nematode cysts. Almost upward of a 30+% reduction in soybean nematode cysts after one rotation after the soybean. Also, soybeans are a late, which means they help the nitrogen, so that's beneficial also to the following hemp crop.
That's good.
Yeah, we're telling our farmers to plant yams, sweet potatoes, with it. But honestly, they could just continuously grow them the entire time. I mean, all they have to do is just add the fertilizer to
Andrea's trying to speak, but I think she stretched her Wi-Fi.
Andrea, you're back.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, were you trying to say something?
No.
All right.
Yeah, you're kind of breaking up.
Well, we've been going strong for over an hour. So if any of my panelists wanna keep going or call it a night, that's fine.
I just wanted to make one last comment, because that was part of your little debriefing.
Sure.
Was what can people do?
Yeah,
That I think is significant.
absolutely.
And I mean, the tried and true, call your legislatures, write letters to the editor is a good one. Inform your neighbors, talk to your family, inform your neighbors, get them interested in understanding that this could be a good thing for North Carolina and for small farmers especially, because they are desperately looking for something in order to save the family farm. And we need to get bottom up, because I really think, like he was saying, the legislatures, they've just run scared. Unless it's a super majority, obviously the majority of North Carolinians are not frightened by marijuana anymore, or cannabis or industrial hemp, then that public opinion will sway the legislatures. The legislature is always going to be way behind public opinion, but public opinion, I think, has to come first.
I have a question related to that. Obviously, there's normal for cannabis. Is there any equivalent national leading organization for industrial hemp?
The one she's with, Vote Hemp, I believe.
Vote Hemp, right? Vote is it?
Vote Hemp is on the side of the legislation side, and there's different ways. Of course, these groups have to be registered so that we can do lobby work. So one of those is Vote Hemp, and that's the lobby arm in the United States. And then we have the Hemp Industries Association, which we just had our 23rd or 22nd annual conference down in Lexington, Kentucky. So thehia.org, that's a national nonprofit for the industry. And then you have votehemp.com or Vote Hemp, and that's the political arm. So definitely take action, go to votehemp.com, go up to that Take Action tab. Super simple, slap in your zip code, it'll come up and tell you, do you have any representatives or senators that are already co-sponsors, for instance. You can pull up and see what current state legislation is happening. That's all on the Vote Hemp side. And then also, don't forget, it's not just about taking action to ask them to support industrial hemp, but it's also taking the action to tell them thank you. because so many of the representatives, they don't hear the words, thank you for supporting our voice. And that's really key to create that positive energy from the ones that are our voice when it starts to making these political changes that we require.
Is that URL on the event page? Or could it be added to the event page?
I can share the URL for that on the event page later. No, that's no problem.
And there is hemp.org.
And hemp.org. So
There's definitely a lot of local associations. We do have the Hemp Industries Association state chapters. But in addition to the state chapters, you will have just like this group coming together and creating organizations that are really working on what's going on the state level. So we've got our state level issues that we're working with, and then we've got our federal level issues, and we have our international level issues. We haven't even talking about the UN treaty and what we've got to do when we come up with the next controlled substance hearing when we're talking about dealing with the UN.
Yikes.
Another thing that we want to deal with when we talk about practicality is in North Carolina we now have a overwhelmingly Republican General Assembly. Because of the way the districts have been drawn, that's not going to change anytime soon. So when you do go to talk to a House member or a senator about industrial hemp or any of these issues, I would like to encourage people to talk to them where they live. When you're going to go talk to a Republican lawmaker about industrial hemp, talk dollars and cents. Talk about farmers going bankrupt. Talk about how this will save the family farmer. Not just because they're going to grow hemp, but now that they're survived, they can grow tomatoes again. Reach out to the Republican lawmakers with the issues where they live. Because if you come up to a Republican lawmaker and talk about, well, we need to do this for freedom, they're not going to care. They care about the issues that got them elected, which is usually dollars and cents, money, the bottom line. And when you do go to talk to the members of the General Assembly, I just want to encourage, don't talk to them about what makes you passionate, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Talk to them about what makes them passionate, and use that as leverage, and then you're going to start seeing some progress.
So Living Ultraviolet Haiti is actually a underarm of Living Ultraviolet in general, which was founded as a direct action and think tank group, 501c3 as well. But so we are hoping to plan, after we get our funding and stuff, we're hoping to plan a direct action for him here in North Carolina specifically, because it kind of makes no sense for us to ship it. Even though the port of New Orleans is so close to Haiti, it really doesn't make sense for us living here in North Carolina, having to go all the way down to New Orleans just to keep track of shipments all the time. So we are going to be planning a direct action of some sort within, not for this General Assembly, but definitely for next session. My friend Rob is going to be going to Haiti in January and let me know how the chemical process of him extracting it is going to go. And after that, then we can get a Kickstarter campaign going, and we'll have the seed funding that we need in order to see what we need to address as far as the state goes.
And bringing things full circle, the Republican Liberty Caucus is a national organization, a 527 educational organization. We stand for limited government, individual liberty, and free markets. And so you can expect the Republican Liberty Caucus nationwide and our state chapters like this chapter here to continue to fight for this issue and many, many other issues that deal with free markets and personal liberty and limited government. So I encourage you to join us. We've got a membership sign-up thing back there. You can sign up with us for only $20 as opposed to paying $45 on the national website. Unless you just have money like that, then go donate. But we need your support, not just monetarily, but your presence, because lawmakers are scared. I've talked to so many lawmakers at every different level, and most of them know that cannabis prohibition and hemp prohibition is illogical, it's unscientific, it's anti-American. but they're afraid. They're afraid of the police union, or they're afraid of the timber industry, or the petroleum industry, or whatever industry that has money to buy lobbyists and wield influence and get them kicked out of their job or blackmailed or whatever, you know. And so everybody's afraid. There's very few people that are willing to take a bold stance. And
brothers for financing. All the politicians do.
They're not going to finance this.
George Soros.
George Soros actually.
Yeah, I don't know. So anyways, you know, it's going to take a grassroots, like so many other things. It's going to take a grassroots upwelling, and I love the saying, when the people lead, the politicians will follow. And so be leaders wherever you are. And with that, if we've got time for questions, we have time for any more questions? Andrea? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I can't hear you.
If there's another question from the floor, I'll take one more, but then I've got to go.
Okay. Is there any questions for Andrea?
Andrea and Conrad, you had kind of mentioned it in passing. What type of chemicals and production, specifically environmental harm, are we looking at for getting this from a raw product to a usable product for either food production, biofuels, or a hard product used for like cannabis and stuff?
Were you able to hear him?
I wasn't.
Yeah, he spoke kind of softly, which is out of character for him. But he's wondering. I think he's wondering, what are the environmental impacts of hemp production? What are the negative environmental impacts?
And specifically,
Negative environmental impacts. Let's just see. What would be a negative environmental impact of the cultivation of industrial hemp? I don't honestly know of any. Monocropping, we talk about into the future, growing, hemp on hemp on hemp on hemp. That would not be good because of disease pressure. But I know of no negative environmental impacts from the cultivation of hemp that I've ever seen, outside if we look at the introduction of pesticides and what that drives into the marketplace, and toxification that can occur. Now, of course, when we look at some of the processing that can go on the side, there could be some environmental impacts, of course, on that side. For instance, just because it's hemp plastic doesn't mean that it's green and that it's good for the environment. It could be using toxic resins in there. We don't know that. So not everything that has the word hemp tied onto it is necessarily better than the cheap other brand that's completely toxic, because they could have put a drop of hemp seed oil in there. But that's, ingredient reading labels. But yeah, I don't know of any negative impacts that I've ever experienced from the site of cultivation of industrial hemp.
So, and David, you were wondering specifically about chemicals used in the process, but what's that?
Specifically for transferring it from a raw product to an industrial product.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, so he's wondering toxins or toxic byproducts that are possibly created from the going from raw material to a manufactured product.
Well, if you look on the hemp food side of things, I mean, essentially you take your grain in from the field, which is dirty, and then, we'll say dirty with chaff and, other particles from the field. That's clean, so you've got the sides that come off of that, non-toxic, can be incorporated into a feed product where allowed. For instance, when you talk about what's going on in the food processing facility, besides maybe, of course, all of the oil that would be required for the moving parts of the engines and whatnot, the gear oil on the side of the food production, it's not creating any negative byproducts. Now, this is not talking about hexane production. We're talking about cold milling. We're talking about hammer milling and milling the seed cake, for instance. So besides like screen replacement, which of course we've got to use metal to get the screens and whatnot, I've seen no toxic waste come off in that process. And even once again, if you look at like Richard Pronis's work, and then the positives that come off of working with the hemp seed oil because of the lack of time you have to run certain machines. So you can shorten the time frame that you're running some of these equipment, which is also decreasing really than increasing. But once again, that is just looking at, even on the decortification side, every single bit of the plant that you're decorticating can be used in some facet without creating a toxic hangover effect.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that last question, Andrea. I really appreciate your time and everything that you do around the world. So thank you.
It's really a bipartisan issue, and it's really, thank you so much, Eric, for reaching out to us. If you're looking for me, you can find me over at hemp-technologies.com. Principally, and then if you're interested also, we do offer this course at Oregon State University called WSC 266 Industrial Hemp. It is a 3-credit-hour course. You can take that course from anywhere in the world. I have brought together 26 lecturers to put on that class. It's e-campus, so once again, if you've got computer access, you can take it. It's WSC 266 out of Oregon State University. And if you know anybody that's actually in school right now in university, they can take this class and get 3 credit hours transferable over. So I'm really powered up on academia and how can we incorporate and create the next leaders in our hemp industry by facilitating that through academia. So thanks so much, I appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you so much again. Have a good night.
Bye. Thank you to the other panelists.
Absolutely. So with that said, if there's any more questions, the other panelists are open to taking any more questions. I'm not going to stop this unless you guys are, or if any of y'all are ready to call it a night.
Is there any more?
Yeah, well, they
So
Question in the back.
Somebody's got a question.
Question.
What is the law regarding industrial hemp? What is the law stating regarding what we can and can't do?
currently, as it's been said throughout the conversation, currently the law enforcement legal community doesn't really view any difference in the type of cannabis plants, except for now the standard or the criteria that they look at is the percentage of THC in the plant, and so where it is allowed in states that have legalized it statewide, the DEA will has been instructed now to let those states go, which is consistent with the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, and they're not going to interfere unless the THC level rises above some number. Why it varies from state to state, as far as I understand it, but that might be what they're going with nationally.
Yeah, as far as the DEA goes, if it has like 0.1%,
which is extremely low.
yeah,
That's a really low threshold. So
0.1%.
But are there any states growing it? Like,
No.
grow it?
No.
Colorado,
well, Colorado.
Colorado's from growing now.
That's cool. Awesome.
So I'm not
That's
sure.
because they don't have to worry about the marijuana side of the house.
Well, Colorado is growing a lot of plants that are high in CBDs, but they've legalized recreational as well.
Right.
So
it doesn't really matter.
So I'm not sure exactly.
But they're growing industrial too.
They're gonna. I don't see why they wouldn't.
Right. I'm saying that the roadblocks are gone.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
the roadblock to industrial hemp is marijuana.
yeah, and in states like California and Colorado.
Well, it was pursuant to the 2014 Farm Bill Act from the feds. That passed in 2014 that instructed the DEA to leave the states that want to legalize alone, leave them alone, and let the states decide if they will allow industrial hemp. And in response to that, 26 states started passing legislation that had uncoupled industrial hemp from the Controlled Substances Act, which is the way they were put together as Marijuana and industrial hemp were put together under the Controlled Substances Act. And so these individual states are uncoupling that. And so far, there are 26 states that have done so. North Carolina, in a sneaky way, I don't know if McCrory has signed the bill, but Senate Bill 313, I don't know if he signed it. As of today, I don't think he has. Has he signed it?
Though, just
It becomes law without a
It becomes law without a
so it's just as
Oh, that's cool.
whether you
Yeah, it's only if he
pass
vetoes
or
it,
not,
it does.
yeah.
But
Awesome.
Oh, okay. So,
we've had plenty of laws that became law without the government signature.
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, then North Carolina would be 27.
Cool.
So, but they probably don't have in the word, the same reason that CBD oil thing didn't fly in North Carolina. They passed a law without any provisions whatsoever in order to implement it. So basically it was in name only. So we might have industrial hemp in the Senate Bill 313 in name only with no infrastructure on how are you supposed to get the seeds legally. I could see that being a snag. I haven't read the actual wordage to see if they did incorporate in there how people could legally obtain the seeds. Because if you can't legally obtain the seeds, you basically self-incriminated yourself once you implanted a field of it.
Wild question.
Because
Shut up.
well, yeah, well, I guess you could go down to the coast and get ditchweed, I suppose. But
Hey, it's the bird, man.
it was the
So,
birds did
so
it.
I read a little bit of the law, and it creates a 5-person commission headed up by the agricultural commissioner, Steve Troxler in this case. And he gets to, I think, appoint the rest of the group. I'm not sure.
Supposedly make a pilot program that the North Carolina State Agricultural side of things can plant it and then selected farmers by that guy.
Right, and it'll probably be a good old boy system like most of the things in our
Well,
state.
they did this in 2006 too. Easily signed an industrial hemp bill in 2006 while it was still illegal on the federal level. So it never went anywhere. It went absolutely nowhere. And it was supposed to authorize NC State and other agricultural type universities to grow experimental or investigate the potential for hemp production in North Carolina, which is like a no-brainer. We grew it before. I mean, yeah, our soil didn't significantly change in the intervening 40 years since the last time it was grown.
As far as the CBD oil goes, I know Kitsch was selling CBD oil as of a month ago. I don't know what that means.
What's Kitsch?
Kitsch is a soap shop.
So
I told you about like
that's my question. It's like the CBD oils, because I know it's kind of like the next frontier. It's something that's been extremely studied lately. Do we know where that's going, like for medicinal purposes? 'Cause I know they can.
Where is it growing?
No. Where's it going?
Oh.
With medicinal purposes? 'Cause I know that's kind of like the next frontier.
Talking about North Carolina?
Or
I
in
was under the
general.
impression that the CBD oil they were selling as like hemp seed.
Do you mean like how is the
oil.
legislation
No, it's
trending?
CBD oil. You can, like how do what kind of medicinal purposes do we see CBD oil being used for in the future?
so
I
it-
know
Well, it varies
right now,
from, legally it varies from state to state.
Right now, it's antiemetic, which reduces nausea and vomiting, anticonvulsant, which suppresses seizure activity, antipsychotic, combats psychosis. So all that schizophrenic stuff, marijuana,
Yeah.
it basically combats it. Anti-inflammatory, which is like arthritis, antioxidant, which combats neurodegenerative disorders like ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, anti-cancer, and directly combats tumor and cancer cells. UNC Chapel is actually doing a study on the effects on tumors as opposed to chemotherapy. Actually, every major medical facility in the United States has some form of medical research on the effects of CBD oil. And then it's an antidepressant as well. So big pharma is really,
That's why they're against it.
yeah, and
They won't make as much money.
they're not gonna, yeah, because this is a product, if you just grow it, you could have something that fights all of these things, and the list grows like almost every month. The list grows about what it does.
So that was your question.
That was my question.
The big deal is just, we tend to think of these are things that we can introduce to combat ills.
Yeah.
If you kind of look at human history, I mean, the founding fathers of this country and further back, I mean, the side-by-side presence of civilization and cannabis tells you that some of these effects that we see, that we say, oh, this could treat this, are actually side effects of us trying to split out human exposure to these things naturally in the first place.
What I was trying to get at was I know like they're doing a lot with like extracting CBD oil, but they're also like trying to separate. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but separate it in some ways where it treats particular symptoms.
Oh, yeah.
Only those symptoms.
Yeah. So there's
versus like a whole broad range of symptoms. So you're taking the oil, you're separating it, and you're doing just one thing with it instead of saying trying to go over the whole entire broad spectrum.
Yeah, some of the critics in the medical community, they're sitting there going, well, the government might legalize this particular molecule in the plant, but then there's like 50 other molecules that have tons of other medicinal benefits, and we can't use those because the government doesn't believe in them, and so we're having to kind of wrestle with all that. But
it's kind of like the monorail of medical marijuana.
If it's an anti-inflammatory, you're finding most of the major diseases, dementia, cancer, heart disease, are all caused by systemic inflammatory response. So, and that would just be major for every major disease process we have.
And if we had research on this, for the past 40, 50, 60 years, there's no telling what state we would be at right now. All that good.
Yeah, looking at our America's history of approving drugs, our country has let hundreds of thousands of people die of painful conditions because the FDA didn't want to legalize this drug, or they didn't want to legalize that drug,
they were orphaned by the expense of the process of making them legal. They become an orphan drug because there are not enough people with that particular disorder in order to justify all the money it would cost to make that drug FDA approved.
And the FDA they don't approve anything. They actually take their orders from a private organization called the USP, which was also created by the Rockefellers who started the AMA. And so the FDA doesn't even really do anything. They take their orders from private industry. And what do you think private industry is concerned about? Their bottom line. And so we have this long history in this country of John Q. Public just being screwed over by the pharmaceutical industry and their puppets in office, and it's disgusting.
Is there even a practical possibility? And I know you answered the question because I've asked it previously regarding the identification of the plant, of actually having on some of the campuses, like right here at NC State in their plant biology labs, that come up with a sort of a taxonomical ID and say this is a different plant.
The problem is it's not. It's not a different plant any more than a poodle is a different species from a Doberman. They're the same species.
But at the same time, the Florida panther gets a different species name from a mountain lion when it's the same animal, depending on where it was born. So the question comes down to, again, that there are many species who get divided out into subspecies, like the Galapagos tortoise gets a new name because they determine they're two separate species.
But there's 3 subspecies of cannabis.
And so therefore the idea of being able to utilize the subspecies identifiers in such a way as to say here's a plant that does not fit under these regulatory regimes.
But so the problem is that the difference between indica and sativa really is like a difference in like THC type of psychoactive high. So that's
kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's not going to be the same. And then there's the third one, which is rudalis, which we haven't even really reached. That's not even like a topic yet. There's a third species that we don't even necessarily study. That grows in India. It grows, that's what
he knows. So where were you on that cake?
Isn't Ruderalis the species that's typically used for industrial hemp production?
No, right now we're using a sativa that for hemp production that makes it has a 98% CBD content as a plant itself, and then we just have to extract the rest. Basically.
So possibly the Ruderalis doesn't have the CBDs, which they're producing medical, not just rope and hemp plastics and stuff. So.
I'm sorry, what are you producing?
CBD oil.
From hemp?
From hemp, yes.
Yep.
That's usually the only thing that you get it from, is hemp.
So, and then the lady we had,
I'm sorry.
yeah, if you guys want to sit closer, we have empty seats up here. So the lady that was teleconferencing in, Andrea, one of the things she works with is hempcrete, and as you guys may or may not know, we have a house built here in North Carolina in Asheville made primarily of hempcrete and other hemp products. The cool thing about it is it's not made with a bunch of carcinogens, crazy glues and all these other chemicals they put in everything. And then also the hempcrete itself is rot and mold resistant. So I mean, anyone that owns a home knows that you are constantly on guard and fighting rot. You know, watching the south side of your house every year. You're putting a fresh coat of paint on there, that sort of thing. Hempcrete, yeah. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. It's really cool. I'd love to make houses out of it. You know, I hate drywall. Drywall is awful. It's full of drywall is full of carcinogens, and the dust that you get when you cut it is awful to breathe in. And so there's so many products.
So if termites eat the hempcrete, do they get high?
I don't think so. No. THC, for example, is a pesticide, a natural pesticide plant produces. So I don't think bugs are going to like that plant very much, even if it only has a little bit in it. It's a plant that bugs don't like.
Or maybe they like it and just can't handle it.
Sure. So, with that.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, appreciate you guys coming out. Oh, announcements. We've got our next event on November 10th. It's going to be on the energy sector, and we're going to wrestle. We're going to learn about the energy sector and wrestle with some of the issues and ideas that are at play. And then in December 8th, we have a delegate training session. This is all here about same time, 7 o'clock, and we'll be teaching you about parliamentary procedure and the delegate cycle for those of you who are interested in being a delegate in the 2016 election cycle. In January 26th, we have a class here, 7 o'clock. We're going to have a presentation from the North Carolina Commission on the Inquiry of Torture, and it's about the CIA's kidnapping program, and they fly everybody in and out of Johnston County to Guantanamo. And we're going to talk about some of the problems with that and also solutions, because that's what we're focused on here, is solutions. And so there's a better way in whenever we talk about any issues, problems here, we're always also going to talk about the solutions. And there's lots of those, and they're very good. So
what's the date for the energy meeting?
November 10th. November 10th.
10 November.
So, thank you guys, and let's give a round of applause for our panel.
Thank you.